on January the 1st, 1948, I went into the Army. Now, in those days, all able-bodied men had to go into the forces at age 17 and 3/4, actually, for 2 years service. I was 18 because I had an apprenticeship. They allowed me to finish the apprenticeship. And I wanted to go into the Navy. Now, you could always get into the Army. A little more difficult getting into the Air Force if you were in this draft, of people. And very difficult to get into the Navy, unless your father had been in the Navy. So, I always wanted to go to sea. My dad would come home with these stories of, Far East, China coast in the 30s and 20s, and stuff like that. So, they were very romantic. And so I said I wanted to go into the Navy. I said, Dad, can you sponsor me? He said, over my dead body. I said, you're not going to sponsor me. He said, no. I said, why? He said, well, it was the way the Navy treated him, and he had a point, actually, because he wasn't treated very well. So he wouldn't sign it. So I went into the Army.
Okay.
And 2 years or so, I come out after the 2 years on civilian life for a few months, and I couldn't seem to settle down. So I thought to myself, I always wanted to join the Navy. I'm going to go down and join the Navy. So I went home that night and I said to my dad, I said, I've got a day off tomorrow and I'm going to tell you this. And I hope you're not going to get upset, but I'm going to go down and join the Navy. And he said, Well, he said, if you're that determined, he said, I'm not going to stand in your way. So I went down. I caught the bus downtown to the high street. I'm walking down the high street towards the Naval recruiting office. And before I get there, there's an Air Force recruiting office. And I'm looking in the window, and they show all these different airplanes, and it says, airframe mechanic, air engine mechanic. I thought, you know what, I'd like to be an airframe mechanic. So I went into this Air Force place, and there's a sergeant standing there, and I said, I'd like to be an airframe mechanic. And he said, well, he said, a little bit of a problem there. He said, there's no problem in you being an airframe mechanic. He said, we'll train you, but there's an 18 months waiting list. Oh, I said, forget about it. I said, no, I'm not interested in waiting. I want to get out. So I walk out, and just as I'm going to the door, he said, oh, sir, come back. So I come back, he said, what sort of education do you have? I said, well, I got grade 12. Or the equivalent, the English equivalent to grade 12. He said, well, you could become aircrew. Wow, nobody had ever flown in those days, only rich people, very few people had flown. That sounded pretty darn good to me. I said, sure. I said, okay, yeah. He said, well, there's a selection process. He said, we should send you away for 3 days, and you go through lots of tests, and they find out where, what you want to, what you're suited for, in aircrew. So I signed on the dotted line, and I went home to my dad, and he said, he says, welcome home, naval rating. I said, I didn't join the Navy. What do you mean you didn't join the Navy? I said, I joined the Air Force. You what?
It was worse?
Well, the Navy had a very poor opinion of the RAF, and there was a reason for it, because in the RAF, it's really only the aircrew that are in danger.
Yeah.
In the Navy, if you're on a ship, everybody's on it. So
it's like thumping their chest. We're more brave. Yeah.
In fact, there used to be a name for people, for ground crew. They called them penguins.
Because they couldn't fly. Birds that they couldn't fly.
So that's how I came to join the Air Force.
So how did he feel when he found out that you were going to be aircrew?
Well, after he simmered down, and it took a couple of days, my dad was had a short fuse. He was a very nice man, but he had a short fuse, and he had very definite ideas on things. He was stubborn, So it took me 2 or 3 days to talk him round, but eventually, well, if it's aircrew, maybe, yeah, okay then,
That's funny. All right. And so, what was the any highlights from the training, exercises, or different things?
Yeah, I suppose so. First of all, I went away for 3 days, and they gave you all kinds of tests, written tests and tests of dexterity, you know, and they funnel you out into what they think you're suitable for. There's pilots, navigators, and engineers at that point. And I was slated for navigation, so I went to navigation training. Now, navigation training consisted of 6 months of boot camp, in effect, but with lots of classroom instruction geared to the airworks, you know, in a very...
Geared to what?
The airworks.
Airworks?
The airplanes, yeah.
Okay.
We call it airworks.
Okay.
And then you go to flying school. And so that's what I did. And then after I graduated from there, they sent me to Canada. And I did my navigation training in Winnipeg. Now, to give you put you in the picture here, the Cold War started in the late 40s. And in 1948, NATO was formed. And all the NATO countries had to make a contribution. And during the war, Canada had a lot of experience training air crews. So they said, what we will do is we'll train the air crews for all of the NATO countries, which of course included Britain. So I went to Canada. And so I did my navigation training there. And I had about 2 months to go before the finish when I met my future wife, Joan. And so we started courting, but of course in 2 months, how far can you get, you know? So, but we corresponded for a year when I went back to Britain, and then she came over and became an Air Force officer's wife.
So how did you meet?
Well, we were invited to, in Winnipeg, in the mess, we had a lot of cadets from all over the NATO continent. There were guys from Denmark, there were some from Germany, there were some from France, all NATOs. And there was, I think it was about 150 of us at the when we came back. We were the second course to go through. The first course was all Canadians, because they wanted to get the bugs out of the system. So we were the first NATO ones in there. So, but when we left, there was 150 of these people. Anyway, in the mess, you would see little cards up saying, to cadets who would like to come for dinner in the home, you know, things like that, and different invitations. And I'm sitting in the mess one day, and somebody said to me, how would you like to go to a football do? Ah, I said, that's great. I said, he says, you know what they're like, lots of booze and that? And I said, yeah. So I said, where is it? He said, we're going to this Greenwood United. I said, okay. So anyway, they came up and picked us up. And they picked us up at the mess on a Friday night, and we had a few drinks at that point. They came in, and they take us by car, and because it's nighttime, so we get out, and there's this church, and we said, well, why are we going into church? Well, it's the Greenwood United Church. Because in England we don't have a United Church, but we do have Manchester United.
Football, yeah.
Newcastle United. So anyway, we go in, and of course in the basement they have this young people's group who are going to entertain us, and they did very well, very nice. And that's where I met Joan for the first time.
Okay. Was it a dance kind of thing, or?
Yeah, there was a bit of dancing. We had a gramophone there, and we did a little bit of dancing and snacks and just chatting,
Okay, like a meet and greet kind of thing, yeah.
That's right. Yeah, everybody wanted to do their bit for the cadets up at the station,
Okay, all right. Thank you.